EdTech Mondays Kenya is supported by the MasterCard Foundation Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning in partnership with EdTech East Africa.
Hello and welcome to today's edition of EdTech Mondays Kenya. My name is Moses Kemibaro, your host and moderator for EdTech Mondays Kenya. Today we're at Innovate Nairobi, a technology event hosted by the Nairobi City County, where we're going to be looking at what it takes to bolster the growth of the EdTech ecosystem in this great county of ours, also known as the Silicon Savannah. I'd like first of all to introduce our panel, Clara Modoni Njeru, who's a researcher at Education Design Unlimited. We also have Ahmed Muhammed Abdi, Chief Officer ECD and TVET at the Nairobi County. And lastly, we have Isaac Ngolo, who's the co-founder and CEO of Zeraki. And our sign language interpreter for today, as always, is Rosa Bono. I'd like to start off with a fairly broad question, starting off with you, Clara. If we look at the evolution of education and more importantly, EdTech, from your perspective, within the county, working with teachers through the research you've been doing, what has been the journey thus far and what sort of impact have you noticed?
The products that are being built are more diverse. I feel like 6-7 years ago, more products were focused on learners and teachers felt they were being left behind. And now you find more products that are diverse. They have a learner component and a teacher component. I think the other aspect is more coding and robotics programs, especially being at the capital city, a lot of programs, weekend programs and holiday programs being available to learners and having more organizations that are catering to learners of parents who can pay for the programs and also funding where coding programs are available in low-income areas and children can engage in this as well.
Since the technology is really embraced, we're able to even pre-record lessons, and of course becomes a revision for children, as well as the teachers are able to have even the scheme of work in a modern way where they can prepare it very easily. Secondly, we are able, even through technology, we're able to monitor the number of when the teachers arrive at school, when the teachers are what they are teaching, what they have taught. We're able also to monitor the enrollment of the children through technology. As we actually in the head office, we're able to see what is happening exactly in school. How many children has arrived today? How many children are enrolled? What do we have? What are the challenges this institution has? Those are actually, we can certainly say that this is a good move.
One aspect that I'd like to add is just the acceptability of EdTech. 5 or 7 years ago, you walk into a school and it feels like you're a stranger. You need to prove to them why you're coming in there. But right now, everybody wants tech. So it's no longer that very big proof point of you need me. It's more like we want you, but you need to explain to us the specific ways you can make life easier for us. And that makes it much easier to introduce new tech. And this is enabled both by school and school ecosystems becoming more comfortable, but also from the policy side, policy sees the need for this. Whether it is the Teachers Service Commission requiring teachers to have ICT integration skills as part of their professional development, or whether it's the Ministry of Education requiring different reporting standards, and as Abdi mentioned, also the county, that creates like an overall ecosystem that's a lot more friendly to EdTech right now than it was 5 years ago.
One of the things I think we discussed even in a previous edition of EdTech Mondays is this issue of inequality. You look at Kenya and we have 47 counties, and across these counties, we have a situation where there is disparities in terms of schools that have resources and those that do not. And I think that same scenario is also mapped into Nairobi County, where you have schools that have resources and those that don't on the fringes. So how can we use EdTech to sort of solve that inequality that might exist? And then we'll also hear Ahmed's and Clara's perspective.
When I think about tech, introducing tech within a wider ecosystem, yes, the people who have a lot more resources always have the first pick, but it is not necessarily something that doesn't need to entirely exclude other people who don't have enough resources. If we think about, for instance, the financial services sector, which is where I was working before, one of the biggest innovations we've had in this space, both M-Pesa, Equity Bank, or microfinance, all those models were built for people who are previously excluded from mainstream finance. So by appropriately thinking about the needs, applying the design skills and ecosystem approach towards this, even in low resource circumstances, you can design solutions that will be appropriate for those contexts. Our own experience, yes, we did start our company in Nairobi, but the very first schools that signed up to our solutions were actually outside Nairobi. So if you're thinking about resource capabilities, the schools in Nairobi tend to be, this looks like the low-cost private schools. There's also like high-end private schools. Same thing with the government-funded schools. Is they're very high cost, and then there's also like the day schools with limited resources. But at least you don't need to spend a lot of money on transport or prospecting.
Ahmed, how is the county addressing that inequality, that digital divide, to make sure that as many schools as possible have the opportunities, have the chance, so that their learners can get the best possible outcomes from using EdTech?
First and foremost, the issue of inequality in Nairobi is very high. Unlike the way the people think about Nairobi is a place of heaven. When you look at the school-going children in Nairobi, 3/4 of our children are based in the informal settlements, meaning they're the most unprivileged people in the society. How we can address those inequalities, one of it is like, the way we have introduced the school feeding program. That will mean that whether you are from Mathare or from Kibera, or whether you are from Kilimani or Lavington, all the children will eat the same food. That means they are going to reduce the gap of the inequality. Secondly, as an institution, Nairobi City County, all of our schools, we have introduced a system of free money for ECD, whereby we are able to provide our children books, all the learning materials, irrespective of where they come from.
Gloria, I'd like to hear from you, the bright spots that you're seeing, especially dealing with teachers, dealing with schools, around the utilization of EdTech and how this is impacting the quality of learning outcomes in the county.
A reference to research projects that we've done in the last 1 to 2 years, and one was focused on parents, actually, focusing on how do you empower parents from low-income areas to support learning while at home. And what we've tested is differentiated interventions where you target parents from low-income areas in different technology, using different technology as opposed to what you would, like a general population. And in Nairobi, we used SMS, storytelling using SMS for parents in low-income areas, and would give them tips how to engage with your child while at home. So, and in Keep Kenya Learning, we saw a lot of reception from parents saying, because of the tips I got, I'm able to involve my child more in the activities at home. Apart from them playing, I know that there's other ways we can learn together. They can help me prepare meals, and that way they are, learning. I think the advantage of Nairobi being the capital city and the opportunities that there are, you find teachers taking advantage of that and being able to own the space when they go to the classroom in terms of digital skills.
Actually, that brings me back to you, Isaac. You're working in the EdTech space. I'm just wondering, in the work that you do, have you seen any innovative, interesting EdTech-related solutions and how they're working within the county? Any stories you might be able to share with us on that front?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I have, I think, 2 examples that come top of mind. So Clara mentioned something about like text messages. And as is this House of Nairobi, and the whole concept was everybody in Nairobi County has access to feature phone, and you can do a lot of learning and engagement within that format. So whether it is I want an answer to this question, or I want to access this library, but also extending it to giving access to a bank of teachers that they had. Also been fascinated by work that Edu is doing. We talked about the limited access to high-end tech. So let's say in a classroom setting, if it's a high-end class, you'll be able to have perhaps every student in that class will be able to access a mobile device at home. But the model that I do is working on is you have a shared mobile device and you just use it like in a timeshare model where you can move it from one person to the next person. Because if you have very specific skills that you're trying to teach, train on, the student doesn't need to use the whole device for the whole day. But that said, I think we also have to mention the government DLP, the Digital Literacy Program that was implemented by the Ministry of Education. In spite of the weaknesses in usage, whether it's from a content perspective or the support ecosystem for that, it did a lot to the ecosystem because we now have proof that it's possible to provide the adequate infrastructure within a school setting. Talk about electricity, talk about internet connectivity, talk about devices. I think one of the biggest skepticism that people had when the program was launching is the computers or the laptops will be stolen. We haven't really had much of that. In fact, I've not visited a lot of the schools, but from those who work with primary school, they say 8 years later, you walk to a school and some of the devices are still very new. Okay, I mean, on the education side, that's not a good thing because you want them to have been worn out based on usage. But at the very least, it's proven that it's possible to get the appropriate infrastructure to the school, get devices to the school, and have them last for a long time. Hopefully, when the government is thinking about like an iteration 2, is building on that strong foundation. So we can say we as EdTech entrepreneurs have benefited a lot from that. And these become lessons that the next generation of EdTech or policy or government is able to build on.
Ahmed, I'd like to come back to you again for the county perspective. Are there any unique initiatives? You already talked about the feeding program and so forth, but are there any other unique initiatives that you're putting into place to make EdTech more pervasive within all the schools within the county?
Technology is embraced from the early level of education. Now in our education system, we have lessons that are even taught in ECDs are integrated and of course taught through digital literacy. What we also need to know that is all our children from the pre-primary education are actually introduced into digital literacy at that level. So that we already have an existing ICT labs in all our schools.
Clara, again, I'd like to hear more about your perspective working with teachers. What have you seen on the ground in terms of empowering them to bring EdTech into their work as teachers? How they're able to incorporate it and make it more impactful in the learning outcomes that they have with their learners?
First of all, the teachers in urban areas like Nairobi are more likely to use tech devices, 20% more likely than in rural areas because of all the reasons, the DLP project being every school in Nairobi that could get the devices has the devices that they need and the devices are being used. We found that 44% versus 26% in urban versus rural areas. So the openness from teachers, like we've mentioned before here, and then the next stage that we are now thinking through is how teachers can be better supported and coached by the system leaders. So one of the things that teachers have requested is more training. So during when digital literacy program was being implemented, training was done once or a few times by different government agencies, and there's not been continuous training for them. And if you're trained on a tech device for all of us once and you never get a chance to use it, again you will forget. And support from school leaders and curriculum support officers, who are some of the people who work with them closely on the day-to-day to coach them, and if they see the importance of digital skills or digital literacy and devices are important, then they will continue supporting them well. All the private organizations leave them because that's their role. The more a teacher feels comfortable with the technology, the more likely they are to go in the classroom and use it effectively.
Oh, yeah, there's something I want to add. When we think about introducing tech within the school ecosystem, we top of mind digital learning and maybe to some extent administrative tools. But I think EdTech has a much broader context within the school. I would even say it includes technology within the education ecosystem. So top of mind, I'm thinking of, let's say, the Dishina County, which is the county government, the national government is partnering with Food for Education. They have some of the best tech when it comes to, is it identification, where they...
Tap to feed.
Tap to feed.
Tap to feed is
really fantastic technology. And then when that is introduced within the school ecosystem, you're just increasing the digital literacy within that tech ecosystem.
So now I'd like to open it out to the audience. If any of you have any questions you'd like to field to the panelists, now will be the time.
My question is directed toward Isaac. How easy was it, especially in the initial stages, for you to navigate the tough terrains of, getting your system to work, getting it into the ecosystem, and especially focused on, capital and, funding as well?
I would say it was very difficult. And everything about EdTech is difficult. I think like the founders within the room will identify. Because what you're trying to do is educate the entire ecosystem about why they need the technology, giving them that initial readiness, even before you build that initial skill that allows you to have to break even. And break even is something that comes way even ahead of that. So in 2015, when we started, that ecosystem was much harder than it is today. We used personal savings to get us a bit of the way. We were lucky to have a lot of friends who were bought into our dream, which enabled us to literally from funding from ourselves, from our friends. And then because of that limited funding from the very beginning, we were very deliberate about turning in revenue. So by year 3, a significant portion of, actually by year 2, a significant portion of our expenses was being covered by revenue that we were earning out, selling either to schools, and actually mainly selling our solution to schools. It was 5 or 6 years, actually it's about 6 years later that we were able to get institutional funding. I would say the space has become better, although comparatively, if you compare what happens in EdTech with what happens in other industries, is still much worse. Because on the one hand, EdTech feels very accessible, but the fact that EdTech tends to be more impact-based, a lot of investors are still struggling how to understand it. It requires a long-term investment horizon. They still few successful EdTech companies that have made money. So little money is coming into the sector. So I would say the lesson for me is you still need to do a fair amount of bootstrapping within EdTech. The ecosystem is becoming much better with time.
My question is to Clara. You are in the research space and in digital literacy. There's now research or being shown online that devices are not good for children. Content gamification is not good. That too much screen time for a child is also not good for a child. So how do you find the balance? Because you're in the research, so is there research that has been done to find that this is the right balance for a child? Because you also don't want to have learners coming out of the system without knowing how anything digital. But at the same time, you don't want to expose them too much so that they are not able to, for example, maybe miss out on certain milestones, learning and also growing milestones. So maybe is there control and what's the way forward?
We haven't done research in Nairobi specifically to know what is a good balance for how long a child is on a device. But she mentioned, minimize the time. I think my question would also be, what are they engaging in? What created this content? Is it based on the curriculum? Is it based on a lot of content that is not localized in that sense, like the storytelling? I suppose that even as we minimize the time, the little time that they spend on the devices would be best utilized on content that is localized and customized for the learners, both cultural-wise and age-appropriate content. So I know a lot of games have been created for learners, and I started this conversation with games targeting learners, and now content being a bit more diverse to target teachers as well. So I think that expands the focus not only to learners only using the devices, but also to teachers. And the hope is that these measuring how much time is spent can then be taken even to schools, so that even as we encourage the use there, it's a meaningful use of the devices and meaningful use of engagement with the content in that sense. Yeah.
Isaac, there are many platform providers right now, many EdTech providers. And how is it that, is there a way we can collaborate? Because I go to a school now, a school has 10 systems. One is for finance, one is for learning, one is for what? And then I'm there trying to pitch mine. Is there a way we can collaborate? Being in this space, is there a way we can collaborate that if one person goes to one school, they get all? Like, it's just one system. You are overloading schools now with too many systems.
What you're describing is actually a market opportunity. So I was looking for the name of the company, but it skips my mind. I think the hypothesis when they were founded, maybe in 2014 or something like that, was that in the US there was about, hundreds of apps that students need to log into or schools need to log into. Who remembers that many passwords? So it was just like single sign-on for schools. And everybody loved it. And soon enough, it became the default authentication layer for everybody else. But then in the next iteration, it meant that if you want to launch a solution within a school or a school district, it's so much easier for you to launch that within their marketplace rather than walking to each of the various school districts. So I think what you're describing is something that can be easily solved. What you're potentially saying is maybe there's someone who needs to come up with an API where you just plug in. You don't need to walk to each of the schools in Kenya. You just plug into this API interface and...
So I think we're coming to the end of our session, and I think I'd like to take it back to the panelists. Based on the conversation we've had, I think in a minute or less, if you can respectively share your thoughts, maybe your parting shot on our conversation today, and then we'll bring it to a close. So we'll start off with you, Clara.
I can reiterate what I've said in regarding evidence and the government and private organizations rallying more to do what has been proven to work. We don't always need to learn from our mistakes here. So, for example, in supporting teachers to embrace technology, supporting digital literacy, like Joanne was saying, with parents, so that schools see the importance of that, and parents are able to chip in and say, we'll pay for internet, or or someone else will pay for the internet, and we all see that this culminates to better outcomes. There's a lot of research and a report by UNESCO a few weeks ago indicated that technology should only be used when it's beneficial to the learners and when it's going to increase the learning outcome. So I think we are at a place where we've been in education technology or talking about it for long enough to say Nairobi County is advantaged enough to now move to the next stage where it's only going to be used if it's beneficial to the learners, and starting with the teachers and other stakeholders who support that in the classroom.
Technology is changing our way of life, and of course education is also part of it. And I'm here to say that any partner that is willing to support the Nairobi children is much welcome, so that at least we can partner and of course see how we can help our children in terms of digital literacy. Thank you very much.
Mine is just a huge thank you to Ahmed and the Nairobi County. We always have these conversations within the EdTech community, and one of the things every one of us always says is, where is government, or how do we learn to speak with government? And can government convene these spaces? So for us to be sitting here, because Nairobi County invited us, is something that's really powerful. When we have multiple iterations of these conversations, we will be able to design for the specific needs and in ways that helps government fulfill its mandate. So it's huge gratitude from me. I think I'm speaking for a lot of EdTech entrepreneurs.
Thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you to our panelists for being part of this conversation. And definitely we're looking forward to catching you in the next EdTech Mondays Kenya. Asanteni sana.
EdTech Mondays Kenya is supported by the MasterCard Foundation Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning in partnership with EdTech East Africa.